Okay, hi everyone. So the supply chain options team is a multidisciplinary, multi-talented team that has met once a month for the past year. And if I can only advance my slide, I could, hang on. One of our primary focus has been defining the key components of U.S. beef supply chains, from inputs to production all the way through to the consumer purchases. And a primary principle underlying our work is that U.S. beef supply chains, especially when they include rangeland production, are really geographically extensive. So you can have one part of the supply chain in one region, another in another region, and yet another in another region. So in this example, we have cow-calf ranching in the Southwest, where a lot of the calves are exported to the Southern High Plains for feedlot finishing, as we learned about earlier today in our extension, in our fabulous extension activity. And then in this supply chain example, corn that originates in the upper Midwest or in the Corn Belt is actually exported from the upper Midwest to the Southern High Plains for that feeding and finishing. One thing I learned this morning is that you should always recheck your assumptions about supply chains and their complexities, because as Dr. Duff explained, a lot of the corn is actually produced locally. So Glenn, we will be looking closer into that. But the key here is that we have geographically extensive supply chains in the US. And so with these principles in mind, we have defined 7 supply chains over the past year, all of them originating on rangeland in the Southwest, and all of them originating with cow-calf ranching in the Southwest. And so we've defined these 7 chains. One of them is really the business as usual, conventional supply chain that is really prevalent, which is Angus, so cow-calf ranching in the Southwest with Angus genetics, calves exported to the Southern High Plains for finishing. Those calves are slaughtered by bigger packers and then nationally distributed. Alternative supply chains that we're looking at have tweaks in that system. So differences in genetics, including heritage genetics, and grass finishing is another tweak in that system, both in the Southwest and in the Northern Plains we're looking at. We're also thinking about manure shed type management or increased manure recycling from feedlots. And so part of our focus is really looking at kind of the state of the world or the state of the Southwest under 2 different sort of states of affairs. So we're thinking about a current state of affairs where this one supply chain is prevalent, and a future state of affairs where all 7 might be prevalent and the number of cattle going through the chains is more balanced. And so to really assess the sustainability of these 2 different states of affairs, the current business as usual versus a future potentially more sustainable. So we're using a coupling framework with the idea that systems within systems are all connected. And so looking at one region where beef production occurs, this is called intracoupling. So this is an intra meaning within. So we have in each region a human system and a natural system, and they're connected through flows of material and energy. So from the human system to the natural system, a lot of those flows have to do with management. And from the natural system to the human system, it has to do with ecosystem services or material or immaterial benefits that we get from ecosystems. And we're also looking at the causes of those flows, the agents of those flows, or who actually makes those flows happen or manages those flows, and the effects of those flows on human and natural systems. So this is all within one region. Layering on, we can start to look at the different regions that are coupled together through beef production, through these extensive supply chains. So you can see that region we were just looking at in the lower left, and that contains all of the components that I just explained. And then layering on, we can start to see these coupling relationships with other regions. So Pericoupling, so we're looking at the Southwest as pericoupled with the Southern High Plains because they're right next to each other. And then the Southwest more telecoupled with the Northern Plains because they're farther apart. And again, that kind of relationship has to do with exporting calves from the Southwest to the Northern Plains for grass finishing. I've included the upper Midwest here as a spillover system because the idea in this type of framework is that other regions actually have some spillover effects. So what happens with the coupling between the Southwest and the Southern High Plains can affect the upper Midwest. And so that's shown with those spillover relationships. So another key part of our thinking that we've developed over the past year in our activities is this thinking of the current state of affairs and this future state of affairs, where this current state is that this one supply chain is prevalent, and that future one where all 7 are more balanced or there's more of a diversity among them. And starting to do some thinking about what that transition looks like with major external forces and internal forces. But really the example here is climate. Climate can affect this transition from this current state to the future state. Continued social distancing, as we're experiencing now, that we saw a lot of news, and I'm sure a lot of us have experienced the effects of social distancing in the packing plants and what that means for the supply chain, and related outcomes of consumers demanding more local beef. And so looking at those kinds of factors and thinking about what it might take or what would trigger a transition from this current state to the future state. And so as a team, this multi-talented, multidisciplinary team, we are applying our research chops to this problem. We're using qualitative research, quantitative research, empirical models to really understand the flows between the components of these systems, thinking about the current state and the future state. And this week, we're really looking forward to connecting with the extension and education teams to think more about the factors influencing participation in the different supply chains and how participation in the different supply chains might affect this transition from this current state to a hypothetical future state. So we look forward to connecting with you all.